post-traumatic growth. And I actually have just learned about this concept from David, but I realized that it's been out there for a while, and it's kind of this new. It's like that phrase is really showing up now, particularly because COVID creates its own house of trauma. So I don't know how long the phrase has been around. I think PTSD was kind of like what we went to, and now there's post-traumatic growth. And I love the idea, I love the concept. And we have David here who's done some research on that. David is a cancer journey coach, certified cancer journey coach, like many of you, and many of you are about to be. And he already told you a little bit about his background. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to you, David.
Yeah,
Are you okay
you.
if I put you in the spotlight?
Oh, sure. Yeah. No
Okay.
problem.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks. Thanks, Sherry Ann. It really is an honor to share, and Randy and I trained together. So Randy, it's great to have you with me today. Cool. And I'll just say I'm not an expert on post-traumatic growth. I have studied it and found it to be really informative, and especially for cancer journey coaching, because it just fits. I mean, as I talk through this, you'll go, oh my gosh, obviously this works. And I studied the book Transformed by Trauma, Stories of Post-Traumatic Growth. Here's the front cover of it. And I will really just talk you through the boiled down version, which I published in my own newsletter. And I think Sherry Ann will be forwarding that to you next week. So you get to read really what I tell you today. It'll all be there. So if you don't want to, you don't have to take notes today. It'll all be there. I'll tell you when I add a few things to it, which I will today. I want to give credit to someone who mentioned post-traumatic growth in a mastermind training. As I mentioned, I am a Presbyterian pastor. That was my original career. I finished up my parish ministry in 2016, and then began training as a coach. But I still tune into some Presbyterian stuff, and one of the things I tune into is the Presbyterian Coach Network. Believe it or not, there is a coaching network of Presbyterians, and Lori Ferguson is the person that was giving us a talk in March. And Lori Ferguson is actually one of the people who have trained many, if not most, clergy coaches. And she runs a school out of Florida, I think, at a seminary. Anyway, she did one on post-traumatic growth, and she was talking to us because it was relevant about COVID. And I was thinking, wow, this is really something, because it so fits with the cancer journey. And she cited Richard Tedeschi and Lawrence Calhoun, who are the primary researchers in this field. And they actually have been compiling and working as researchers for about a decade on post-traumatic growth. And they've been working with military personnel and doing this large, massive study with military personnel, because it's so obvious with military personnel that they have PTSD and they come home from combat and all kinds of things have happened to them. And then they have this large body of information and study worthy people who they can work with. And they do wonderful work with them. And, from there, they can compile so much data. So what I want to do as I launch into just giving you a bunch of information is just to give you a question. So it'll benefit us as we talk after I finish giving you information. Be thinking about how cancer journey coaches can utilize post-traumatic growth information to enhance our coaching. Okay, and you'll just see it pop up all the way through what I present as I summarize the book. All right. I just first want to tell you the story about one of the people they summarize in the book, and his name is Eric. It's written up, so I'll just summarize his story. Eric is a man who entered the military at age 24. He became part of the Marines. He found that the structure of the military was really good for him, so he thrived in that structure, and he, climbed up rapidly as he trained and gained status as a Marine. He was deployed after 9/11 and as an infantryman in the Marines, and went to the Middle East and found combat. He liked it. He thrived in that environment, and then was redeployed repeatedly in the Middle East. And as time went on, he became a little more disillusioned about his commissions as he kept going back. And then one time after he returned, he was in a therapy session. And at the very end of his therapy session, his therapist said, "Well, what would you do if you weren't a Marine?" And he said, "I'd become an artist." And he just said it offhandedly, and it surprised him and his therapist. And he didn't know where it came from. Then he realized that as a child, he really had wanted to be an artist, but his father had told him, artists for, dummies, or I can't remember what he said. Something like, "Oh, artists for losers." And so that's what was ringing in his head all throughout his life. So instead of quitting the military, he went back for another deployment, and back to the Middle East, back to combat. And at that point, he was shot in the chest, and he landed on his back, and blood began to pool up underneath him. And he realized that, he was going to die as a man who was depressed with PTSD, and he would never fulfill his dream of becoming an artist. And he began to cry. And he was, however, rescued. And his buddies pulled him out, and he began to recover. And you guessed it, he quit the military, and he recovered completely, and he went back to school, and he utilized some of the military benefits to get retrained as an artist. And then he began to find some success as an artist. He sold his work. It was getting high prices, and he had studio showings after studio showings, and he was a successful artist, and he loved it. It was his dream. In addition, he began to teach art, and he began to draw crowds when he taught art. And he discovered that his true dream was teaching students how to discover not only art, but themselves. And I'll read just a little bit about what I wrote, because it becomes really significant. Couple things. He teaches his art students that good stuff happens when you make it happen. And he also indicates that sleep eludes him some nights, and on other nights, when he does sleep, dreams of combat sometimes haunt him. His life has tremendous purpose now, however. The motivational energy for that purpose began with his near-death experience. Through that experience, he was moved emotionally to connect with the depths of meaning in his life. Beyond the voice of art was for losers that his father had told him as a child. He rose above that, obviously. And this motivation allowed him to create a mission for the rest of his life. And here's Eric quoted in the first person. I am now running 2 schools that teach inner city kids how to paint, draw, sculpt, and a dozen other things for free. But I think Just as important is that I'm teaching them how to accept who they are and to not let anyone piss on their dreams. And I mean nobody. I wake up every morning and think how lucky I am today. And I'm not talking about being an artist, but a man who is able to help kids go after what they believe in. I'm a guy who went from lying in a pool of my own blood, crying that I wasted my life, to someone who is making a difference throughout the city. That's better than selling any painting or landing a gallery showing. That's what life's about, brother. Okay, that's on page 267 of the book. So that his story really illustrates all of the clinical data that they talk about throughout the book. And there's actually about 5 or 10 stories of different military personnel that are not just like Eric's, but illustrate all of the same principles in the book. So the book, I can't recommend it more highly, because it's not so much clinical as it is stories about all these people who have post-traumatic growth. They all had and still have PTSD, but they developed the ability to grow beyond it. And so I'll go on then to talk about.
So can I just interject, David? Because what I really got with this
Yes,
last
please.
part, particularly that his own quote was, he thought the form was being in the military, and that fulfilled him for a while. And then he realized that there was this other form that was his passion, which is art. I find it here kind of serendipitous that we started off this whole conversation about art, and then he got to the real function. Like, what was he really wanting to experience? What is he really going after? And the function of his why. What is his why? So I just wanted to underscore that, because it was so prominent in that last quote that you read for us.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks, Sherry Ann. That's great. Yeah, so I want to dive into some like little definitions here that sort of will help ground our understanding. One thing that isn't in my summary in the newsletter is just a couple things about being transformed by trauma. In the picture on the front cover of the book is a piece of pottery with cracks in it. Anybody know what that represents? Does that bring to mind anything? It's a form of pottery art called kintsugi. All right. Yeah. Naomi.
I think I have heard the metaphor before, but it's basically the idea. Is it gold or something that it kind of creates in the broken places it's strongest? Is that right?
Yes. It's lacquer mixed with gold.
Mm.
And so in that form of ancient Japanese pottery art, they break the pottery and then they use that lacquer mixed with gold to put it back together. And the idea is that it's stronger now that it's put back together. And so the symbol is that rather than what we often think of PTSD people being weak and fragile and unable to really cope with life, people who come back, and he'll assert this in the book, and grow from their PTSD are actually stronger and actually do amazing things with their lives, just like Eric. So stronger from their growth rather than weak, inept people because of their PTSD. Sometimes the illustration is like a caterpillar who isn't the same after they go through the metamorphosis. Is a completely different creature when they become a butterfly. And one of the things that the book illustrates is how people don't talk about resilience in this work. They talk about complete transformation. So it's not bouncing back after something. It's not like, whoopee, you know, I conquered that. Isn't that great? It's not the opposite of PTSD. It's a total breakdown, and it's hard, and then it's a rebuilding after that. So it's a real distinction there. So a couple of definitions. One, and this is something you might want to take notes on. I didn't include this in the newsletter, and I wish I had. The definition for trauma, and this I think will come in handy when we do work with cancer patients or even ourselves, because I might have dismissed myself from this discussion because I could sort of say, well, you know, I didn't get my legs blown off. I was never shot. I didn't go to combat. I had cancer, and you know, I'm dealing with it. So I might not have been myself thinking that I had trauma. Okay, so definitions the authors will put in here. They cover 3 definitions. One comes from the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistics Manual of Psychological Disorders. That is, being directly or indirectly exposed to an event that threatens harm or death. So that's the definition of trauma in the DSM, being directly or indirectly exposed to an event that threatens harm or death. Okay, very clinical definition. On the street, you might ask someone, you know, what is trauma? And, you know, sort of the general public definition might be different types of life stress. Okay, so just kind of a lightweight definition that we all might come up with. Okay, you know, trauma, okay, different kinds of life stress. I had to have stitches put in my arm because of a deep cut or whatever. It was traumatic. So the authors go toward more of a field definition or an experiential definition. And this is sort of a lengthy discussion, so just listen to it first. They say it's not so much the event itself, but how events change a person's ways of thinking about how we are and how others are supposed to be, and the ideas about how the world should work and what our lives are supposed to look like. After a difficult life event, those things that we knew to be true are in question. Understanding the definition of trauma is less important than understanding the impact of trauma on the person and on those around them. Just think about your life before cancer or before your major illness and your life after it. Think about how things changed for you. Think about how you saw the world, about how the world became different to you, about how your life became different. And I think you'll notice how things start to ring true in the definition of trauma. Okay, and I'll just read that one more time. The authors say it's not so much the event itself, but how events change a person's ways of thinking about how we are and how others are supposed to be, and the ideas about how the world should work and what our lives are supposed to look like. After a difficult life event, those things that we knew, quote, to be, quote, true, are in question. Understanding the definition of trauma is less important than understanding the impact of trauma on the person and on those around them. Okay.
I love that, David. And I just want to chime in here with like my story, because it's not Eric's story, but before cancer, I thought the American dream, the Norman Rockwell picture, was the way that I was supposed to do it. Have a family, have children, have a husband, have a nice home, have a great job, and that's going to get you to happiness. And then, so I strove and was pretty good at what I did, but I wasn't fulfilled. And then cancer shows up in my life, and it's like, wow.
Mm-hmm.
This, you can't even do this anymore. After I was done with the first journey. It was like, nope, everything inside of me did not want to do what I was doing in corporate America anymore. And it was like, I can't do this. That's the impact on the trauma
Yes.
on me. It's like, nope, not that. Go find something else. And then it led to the Cancer Journey Institute. I mean, so I can see that whole path and its trajectory. So it's like right on to what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. I can see how my life radically changed.
Right?
And there are things that I would have done pre-trauma, and my gut just says absolutely no, you're not going to do that today.
Mhm.
Okay, so a definition of PTSD, and this is also pretty key.
PTSD or PTG?
PTSD, the post-traumatic stress disorder.
Okay.
Okay, it is a self-protective posture toward life that is essentially automatic, treating the world as an unsafe place, being easily startled, having nightmares, feeling emotionally numb, having flashbacks to traumatic events, feeling mistrustful, avoiding others, and depression are all part of this self-protective reaction. People who have witnessed or directly experienced any variety of traumatic events may experience PTSD. Now, this is in my newsletter, so you'll see it printed there, but you don't have to classically fit this definition of PTSD. But in one of my clients, anytime she has a slight hint of any bodily ailment, she goes automatically to cancer's back, and she panics, and she goes straight to her doctor and says, I got to get tested. I think I'm probably going to die, and that's PTSD, right? That's that's it right there. Okay. And then PTG, or post-traumatic growth, is defined this way. It is a theory that posits that people can grow in one or more of 5 different domains of growth. Okay, and I'm going to share the 5 different domains right away. So it is a theory that posits that people can grow in one or more of the 5 different domains of growth. And people as in PTSD people. Okay, keep thinking now as I launch into the domains about how cancer journey coaches can utilize PTG, post-traumatic growth, into information to enhance our coaching. Okay, so this is where it gets a little bit more juicy. Okay, here are the 5 domains. I'll just read them really quick. The 5 domains are new possibilities, personal strength, changes in relationships with others, appreciation for life, spiritual and existential change. So those are the 5. I'm going to go back over them one at a time, but that's what they are. And what is meant by domains are simply areas of growth. So that means that people who have had trauma can grow in each of these 5 different areas. They may discover, after the trauma happens, that one or more of these areas, they'll start to grow. And it may be concurrent with their PTSD issues, or it may be a time after they experience the PTSD. It doesn't matter. It can happen at the same time, or it can happen later on. Okay, so number 1, new possibilities. And I'm just going to briefly describe it. I'm not going to take a long time, but new possibilities means where people develop the courage to quit things that no longer serve them, go back to school, change careers, take up a hobby, or go do other things that more closely match their interest and feel more authentic. We noticed that in Eric. What did he do? After he recovered, he quit the military and went to art school. Okay. Then personal strength. It's in the book, it's described as the sleeping giant of post-traumatic growth. And this is part of the illustration, right? I always have to look at the spelling to pronounce it right. Kintsugi, personal strength. This is, I broke it down into 4 different areas. Number 1, a new kind of strength where the person is better attuned to personal limits and boundaries. So Sherry Ann, it's just like that gut level feeling of, I can't do that anymore. I'm not going to do that anymore, right? From your own experience. Okay. And people may develop the ability to depend on others as allies. Okay. So in our cancer journey roadmap, there comes allies. So we find that we, become resourceful in how we ally ourselves with other people. 3, have a better understanding of surrender and acceptance instead of brute strength. So a lot of military folks, will just push through stuff. And they talk about that in the book, especially commanders, find that this brute strength gets it done. And then after a traumatic event, no way can they do that. So they begin to understand the nuances of life and how a gentle approach or a kind approach or a sensitive approach is much more powerful than the brute strength approach. And then number 4, a new ability to give up on one way in favor of a strategy that is better suited for their current time in life. So understanding that going back into the military again and staying, holding out for that 20-year career is not particularly serving him. Eric decides he'll quit and go into art school and finally find his dream. Okay, then change in relationships with others. Perhaps we've all found that to be true as we change course in life due to cancer or major life illness. Bonds develop as survivors tell their stories, and also shifts occur in relationships. Some old friendships and relationships fall away and others get stronger. So Eric discovered an immense new world in his art world, and an immense new series of relationships became real for him. And I think a lot of us discover when we begin to tell what has happened to us, new relationships and new bonds of friendships form. And at the same time, the book puts it this way, a sort of pairing of, as in cutting back of relationships occurs when others just can't relate to us after the trauma and after we start talking about the trauma. And hard as that sometimes is, that sometimes is also freeing.
Oh, I want to chime in here, David, because the relationships that we're talking about, yes, with other individuals, but I'm sensing the change in relationship with myself, with ourselves. It's like that trauma kind of just shakes the tree. And what's left is like what's real, not the loose, the ones that really were just kind of hanging on by a thread. It's like what's real here. And I notice just in the cancer realm is there's oftentimes a new sense of appreciation for ourselves when we're coaching our clients.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. And number 4, to go right along with that, appreciation for life. Though many losses may have been suffered by PTSD. Each can develop deep appreciation for life itself, or for the relationships of those in their inner circle, and for the special gifts of life. So, as we've often described or experienced it, as we develop allies not only in the people close to us, but also with nature, with pets, just how we discover those deeply appreciated relationships. And then finally, the fifth domain of post-traumatic growth is spiritual and existential changes. So the book describes spiritual underpinnings getting revamped. And this tends to mean in their research that some develop more experience-based spirituality. So in one exploration of an individual's life, they had grown up in a church, and their expectation was kind of a social experience of church, and their status was bound to that social life. And he goes off to the military. She grows distant from him, and the marriage fails, and he comes back with PTSD, and so on. And what he learns in his spiritual change is that his spirituality is better served to his behavior rather than to his social status. And so he begins to allow his spirituality to inform his behavior and be in more of a behavioral relationship than a social status relationship. That was one illustration of it. The book actually does consider spirituality from different religions, and suggests that any religion supports post-traumatic growth. And so it's interesting research there, that participating in any religion enhances growth. And so, I mean, they go into Jewish religion, they go into the Islamic religion, they go into Christianity and Buddhist religions, and they just talk about how in each case there's a history of supporting post-traumatic growth. And even before the current era of research about it, they trace the theological works in ancient religions and how they addressed trauma and growth in them, which is, I don't know, I'm just throwing that out there. I didn't actually cover that in the newsletter, but it's kind of cool.
Well, and that's
for a guy like me.
fascinating. What I'm realizing as you're talking is I can see where religion is definitely a anchor for a lot of people going through their cancer or even after the treatment phase. And I also see them stepping away from religion, but not necessarily spirituality. Like sometimes even their spirituality is enhanced. And when I say spirituality, that there is more of a connection of how I'm connected to the whole, without the religious slant. It's more of the behavior, like or even a belief. It's more like I get at a much deeper level that I'm connected to the whole. And sometimes that's something that they process while they're working with their cancer journey coach.
Yeah, I'm with you there, Sherry Ann. I'm one who, my trauma was not just cancer, but also with church conflict. And I don't worship. That's quite a confession for a pastor, but I don't go to worship. But I do have now a deeper spirituality than I did. And so Interesting, huh?
Yes. It's like yes and to all of it.
Yeah.
But there
Right.
is a shift sometimes, well, oftentimes, because I often have experienced people who say, I don't believe anymore
Right.
because this happened to me. And it's like, okay, I mean, I'm not here to tell you otherwise, but that
Yes.
it's all over the map.
Sure. Yeah. If people's belief is based on, if I believe bad things won't happen to me, and therefore
Mm-hmm.
bad things happen to me, so something's wrong with God,
Mm-hmm.
then there's a problem. And so I can see why they wouldn't believe anymore. So, God wasn't powerful enough to protect me. Oh, okay, I'm done. So,
Right.
right.
Right. Do we
Okay.
want to
And then,
pause here just for a few moments to talk
oh,
about
sure.
this with the group, or do you
Yeah.
want to? Because I know
If,
you want to go into the 5 processes, right?
yeah.
Okay.
Would it serve everyone better if I just got through it all and then we talked?
What are you guys thinking?
That works for me.
Yeah, I
Go
think
through
that
the
makes sense. Yeah.
go through the whole thing, and then okay, cool.
Okay.
And
The
David,
other,
continue.
okay. The other part of that was existential change, and they're fairly delicate and simple with that comment, but what they say is existential change is discussed as a way many find meaning more in the present rather than in developing a universal truth for all time. And what I notice in their discussion there is that people going through trauma find that really, in the mindfulness sense of it all, getting present is much more useful to them than getting really philosophical about universal truth. And it just serves them so much more powerfully. Okay. Then the processes for post-traumatic growth, and I'll try to speed up just a little bit, but these are really where, we as coaches kind of come into play. Learning from trauma is the first one. And I'll just mention the 5 of them: managing distress, disclosure, putting the story together, and then mission, or the mission. Okay, so learning from trauma. And here's a quote about what a trained psychologist will often tell people with PTSD that enables them to kind of move forward. Okay, and it has to do with that definition of PTSD, that automatic response to danger. Okay, and so imagine someone like you and me who have that automatic response to the trauma we've had, and hearing from a psychologist tell us this: there is nothing wrong with you. Your brain is doing what it naturally would do to protect you from threats, and you are being very vigilant to the threats your brain is perceiving. Now, we must help your brain relearn that you are no longer in control of the things it is perceiving as threats, and they are no longer threats. Okay, so the beginning of that process is to help people realize that their brain has gone on sort of an automatic pilot to protect them. And that's good. That's how we survive. But the retraining process is to help people perceive differently and to understand that, okay, what you're seeing as a threat is no longer a threat. So let's figure out how to calm your brain down and to calm yourself down. Okay. And for those of us who are not in combat, the equivalent is to help us retrain in a similar way. Okay. So learning from trauma begins there. But what goes on from there is to look at trauma as a teacher. And instead of sort of running from it and saying, oh, trauma is bad, is to say, okay, now how can I learn from my experience? Managing distress is where they go from this is really unique. Wasn't what I expected, but basically it's saying, okay, you know, you're in a state of distress. This is what your brain has done. We'll help you kind of retrain yourself from that. But in the meantime, you have to take care of yourself. All right. And so what health and wellness coaches will need to do is come in here, and basically it's getting enough sleep, it's reducing your alcohol or not good drugs to help your body manage itself better. It's increasing your nutrition, increasing exercise and movement, retraining ourselves to relax. Often it's mindfulness work that can really help a person, retraining our thought patterns and regulating emotions. So all of that very mundane and day-to-day work comes into play there, managing distress. Then disclosure, really big deal here, and we do it with the Cancer Journey Roadmap, the 4 phases of awareness, and all that wonderful stuff we do, sharing our trauma with a trusted listener. It can be a safe stranger or a safe person in their research who has experienced a similar kind of trauma. Once the ice has been broken, then telling the story to a widening circle begins the healing process. So we can all remember in our training how wonderful it felt to have a group of people, a circle of people who we began to tell our story with, and all the tools in the cancer journey that we got to use with each other, and just how healing that was. But disclosure breaks the silence that isolates a person and holds them in a pattern of secrecy. And there's a lot that goes on with trauma victims that makes us think that we should keep this a secret and that we're unique somehow, and there's a problem with us that we shouldn't tell about it until we break that secrecy and begin to tell our stories. And then putting the story together is just continuing that process. Story has a way of helping us stitch our life, our memories, and our identity together. As the book describes, it is a way our psyche keeps track of who we are in the course of time. So as we tell a story, it's in a sequence of time, and our psyche kind of our psyche is able to keep track of who we are in that process. And it takes time and energy to compose our life stories, but as we begin to piece our story together, we begin to make sense of who we are today. And finally, the mission. The authors team up with Richard McNally, who is from Harvard, a researcher from Harvard, and they line out 5 keys for developing a mission. They are giving selflessly out of the tragedy. And we can see Eric in this all over the place. Okay, so just remember Eric's story and what he does with his art school, giving selflessly out of the tragedy, understanding the value of learning in and through the tragedy, value positive change and growth as outcomes of trauma, and view it as honoring those who have lost their lives. Just think of our discussion earlier today. Remember that when we're caring for cancer survivors, we're also honoring those who have died. Accept and foster a new identity as a survivor, being a compassionate person, and one who is wise, knowledgeable, and able to help others, and living out of a personal mission like Eric, teaching art to help kids go after what they believe in. Okay, I kind of blitzed through that, and I'm depending on your wise and wonderful minds to now kind of pitch in and think about how, as cancer journey coaches, we can utilize post-traumatic growth to enhance our coaching. And as you're thinking, I'll just give you an example. I was with a cancer survivor last night, coaching. I've been coaching her for some time now, and we've been working together. She's a wonderful client. And she read my newsletter and she said, hey, we've been working on a lot of these things. And one of the things in the post-traumatic growth that I read about was that mission thing at the very end. And that's one thing we haven't talked about so much. Do you think we could work on that next time? And I said, absolutely. And so I gave her those 5 steps, you know, kind of reinforcing what she had already read. And I said, you know, we really can combine that with what you've done with your power vision moment, with the 4 phases of awareness, and with your cancer journey roadmap, because you've already done a lot of this work. And remember what you've done there, and we'll talk next time. And so that's what she's working on going forward. So that's just an example of how these things can work together. And so tell me what you're thinking about how post-traumatic growth works with cancer journey coaching.
Well, I just see it just kind of as an overlay of the whole roadmap, you know, when you're talking about kind of surrendering and open to new possibilities, I see that happening in the pit, you know, so using that as maybe a visual tool to kind of describe kind of the concept of post-traumatic growth, I think could be really helpful.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
And then, yeah, like asking the questions that you had said, like what, you know, what might not be serving you right now, or just kind of helping them kind of get clarity on that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think it's good when you're, I guess the way I interpret it is when you're coming, it's good to use this after your breakthrough. I mean, this is my vision. I may be cloudy, but that's my vision. So kind of use some of this. It's just me.
No, I absolutely agree with you, Jolanda, because there's a shifting of values that's part of, like, when you're in breakthrough, it's like, wow, what shifted? And being able to slow down enough with your cancer journey coach to go, something's different here and I'm not really even sure. And just even going there as the starting point of, what are my values now? I used to value, and I hate to admit this, but I'm going to, prior to my my cancer journey, I valued money. And that's nowhere in my values right now. It's so much else takes priority and precedence and is much more important.
Because after your breakthrough, right? I mean, because things have shifted. It's like you're not the same, and things aren't the same. Like you said, your values are the same. You're not the same. Your outlook, what's important, what's not. And so, to me, it's like that's another roadmap after your cancer journey roadmap. You know, okay, this is a roadmap because you're going through still other phases to take you through that.
Right. I so see this in the survivor realm, right? It's like, okay, I'm standing there, I've had breakthrough, I'm about to go into transformation, and I'm looking back going, so what now? When you have this whole post-traumatic growth steps and processes and definitions. I mean, it's so helpful. I agree with you.
I really, this mission part is exciting to me. I've been coaching a woman that has, you know, a history of really severe traumatic childhood. And she started getting therapy when she was 16 and she's in her 70s now. And she, like, we've got the managing distress piece down, you know, really well. But she's still super stuck in the trauma. And I feel like she's done the other processes that you described for post-traumatic growth, but the mission piece. So I'm curious to explore that with her, because I feel like that might give us another direction to work from that, wounded place that she is. So yeah, this is great. And I love, like Naomi said to me, it's such an amazing, beautiful overlay right onto the cancer journey roadmap and the 4 phases and so much stuff. It's great. Thank you for this, David.
You bet. Now, I think one of the things that occurs to me is that it really affirms the work that we do. And if all it does is sit in the background of what we do as coaches, it's just sits there as encouragement. It's just saying, hey, you're on the right track. You're doing really good work to be there with people and encourage them to do things that we know they can do. We know they can do post-traumatic growth. We know it happens. And so that at least is one thing that we can glean from all this research.
Yeah, definitely. And I think too, for some people, that sense of, oh, you mean I'm doing PTG? Cool. I'm doing this new buzzword. Awesome.
Right.
I love how you also said, David, I think you distinguish between, like, it's not that they're going back to, it's not like the resilience where they've had a bad situation and they're going back to live their lives. It's like they're transformed, right? There's a transformation into something new, just like that pottery you were showing us. And because I noticed that in survivors, and I work with survivors, I guess, I really term it survivors, even though they're brain cancer patients, but there's such a desire to go back to who I was. I want this to be over. I want to go back to who I was. And so I think there's something important here about, that whole transformation, like you can be more, you can be different and new and I don't want to say better, but something about that, I kind of bringing that into patients and when we're treating our clients.
One thing about the Japanese art of kintsugi that I've always found really beautiful and draws me to it is that it not only is this idea that you can be repaired, but they highlight where the wounds are as a show, a demonstration of, we are not made more damaged by our wounds, but more beautiful for having worn these wounds on the outside. And so I think that with cancer journey coaching, I think when people are coming to cancer coaching, they're looking for transformation. They're primed for post-traumatic growth. Cancer is trauma. And if they're looking to say, my life is kind of unmanageable in this situation now, and I'm looking for someone to help me move through this, they're sort of primed to go through these experiences and experience transformation and growth. And I love the kintsugi metaphor here, because I think if we can help them see their cancer as part of their, it's not, I hate to say that, your cancer was a good thing, but it sort of was. And so now we can turn it into something beautiful. We can make of it something beautiful.
Yeah. Naomi, one of the things in the reading I noticed was that a lot of the survivors in the book will try to go back to their old life. They'll get burned by it. They'll like bounce back really quick, and they'll try to go back to this normalcy, and then they'll realize, all of a sudden, all the flashbacks and everything just sort of emerges, and they sort of buck up against the brick wall and realize they can't go back, and it's a sort of very bitter realization. And that's when they have to realize, I can't be resilient. I can't bounce back. And the book describes them growing to hate the word resilience, and realizing, that they really are broken pottery, and they really have to emerge completely different. And I once interviewed a woman who is a survivor of breast cancer, and the way she put it was this: I would never wish cancer on my worst enemy, but cancer has been the best thing that ever happened to me. And it's just sort of that upside down thing.
Yes, yes,
you know
yes. Well, and what Naomi and Leslie and you are saying is, they do want to go back, and we all know on this call, we know there's no going back. And I love the idea of having this pottery, like Leslie was saying, is we're highlighting even what was broken and making it beautiful. And it's that I don't know how to move forward, so help me, cancer journey coach. And I don't know if I have the wherewithal, but if you have this pottery there for them as an example of, you're going to be made better, so it's worth doing the work. And I can't do the work for you, but this is what's possible. I love that. I mean, I'm like sitting here going, I want to get one of those pieces of, I can't pronounce what you guys call it, but so that I can hold it up and tell the story and say, you're going to be this beautiful when you're done.
Yeah, Leslie knows how to pronounce it the best.
Because I learned about it a few years ago, and I loved it, and I thought this was really a beautiful metaphor for sort of the transformation that happens. The cracks happen. The cracks are the cancer or the trauma from combat or sexual assault, whatever it may be, and those things are out of our control. Just like when you drop a bowl, it's going to crack in ways that we can't control. But what we can do is help make it a thing of beauty in the healing from it.
Yeah, I love that. It's like really a reclaiming, the parts of you that we knee jerk want to say, oh, that's not me. That's not me. I'm going to just forget about that happened in my life or whatever. But it's like a reclaiming it with just such an honor and such a, yeah.
It also speaks to what David was talking about, where it's feeling like I'm the only one that's going through it. There's shame and secrecy and isolation. And this kind of allows you to bring it forth into community more. And, we get traumatized in community and we heal in community. So I think that's another important piece of it as well.
One of the beautiful illustrations in the book is of a group of veterans who are disabled from the waist down, and they're mountain climbers, and so they wheel up to the mountain in their wheelchairs, and they don't know how they're going to ascend the mountain, and together as a team they figure it out, and they actually get to places where they have no idea what their next move will be, and how they're going to make it up or down, and they just figure it out. And so another one of those things about the incredible things they are able to do, and don't know how, but they do it.
I had to go plug my computer in, and I grabbed my bowl that I.
Perfect. Yeah, perfect.
Wait, no, hold it up again, Leslie.
It was my lame attempt at it, so I got a little bit messed up. But I did this last summer when
you did that yourself.
Yeah.
Wow.
Accidentally. So then I was like, well, let me see if I can't fix it in the wise Japanese way instead of the.
Awesome.
You just threw something in Sherry Ann's head. It's like, what if we had a workshop where cancer survivors did this, aka
Yes.
Yolanda Breakthrough. It's like, let me take this broken, useless thing that sometimes we feel like in the pit, and let's take that gold and lacquer that you said, David, and I love that.
Perfect.
To have that as a totem.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. We're not hearing you, Jolanda. You're echoey. Okay, sorry. No, we still don't hear you. Sorry. Paige, did you want to say anything to this?
The one thing that came up was that just the title of it is such a realm of possibilities. I'm a PA in a family medicine practice, and 90% of my patients have trauma. And to just know there's something out there besides just the trauma, that there's growth from the trauma, like that just holds such amazing possibility. And like even like an invitation out of the victim or the, so I love that. And then the as a coach, being able to witness that for someone and hold that space for them when they can't, is pretty amazing. So I really appreciate this.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good.
The gift of us to them while they're going through their journey. Okay, so as we've got 4 minutes, and so let's just go around and have a takeaway. David, we'll come back to you last. Leslie, one takeaway in your word?
My takeaway is that this is, beautiful and meaningful work, and there's lots of different ways that we can help people become whole and integrated, complete humans, even through their devastating trauma. So my word is inspired.
Thank you. Paige.
I think what's really sticking out for me is that gold lacquer suture along the cracks. And that's good to have that reminder. And grateful is my word.
I love that addition of suture, Paige. Such a good visual. Naomi.
Yeah, I think it's just standing in my mind about the whole idea of transformation, like better than you were, not resilience to back who you were, but better than who you were. And my word is I just feel very grateful. David, you explained it so well. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Jolanda, can we try again?
First, I want to say thank you, David, for sharing. My word is insightful, and I want to say that I think this is because like it doesn't end after breakthrough. I think this to me it just carries it on further to help because when you're not the same, you're not going to ever be the same, and that's okay because there is something better for you to be better than you were before, or if not better, something in a beautiful, different way than you were before.
Yeah.
So I just think that's just the way I have received the information that David has given us today. Thank you.
Thank you. David, your takeaway and word.
My word is collaboration, because it was really a delight to be with you all and share, but hear your how you contributed and made it what it is today. So I really appreciate that.
And your word.
Oh, collaboration.
Oh, okay. My takeaway is so many, but I'm just gonna I'm sticking with the workshop. so more to create and put out there, even just starting with us to see how it works. And then, I don't know, it just feels like we so oftentimes need something to hold on to. And so having that totem is, and then visual helps. And my word is, you guys, just as in the individuals, you bring so much, and then as a whole, it gets so much richer. So my word is gratitude. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us and being here, and David for your wisdom and your insight and your willingness to share this. I appreciate it. And as always, we're open to what others want to share with the group, because again, collectively, we are so much stronger and more powerful.